Blue lights erupted in the rear view mirror like a sudden storm on a calm evening. Marcus Thornton's hands tightened instinctively around the steering wheel, his knuckles pressing white against his dark skin. The digital clock on the dashboard read 7:45 p.m., Sunday. The holiest day of the week for most people, but apparently not holy enough to spare him from this. He'd been driving exactly 55 miles per hour in a 55 zone. His seatbelt was fastened. His registration was current. His inspection sticker was valid through next April. Every single law had been obeyed to the letter, just as he'd done for the past 30 years of his professional life. But Marcus knew with the kind of bone-deep certainty that comes from lived experience that none of that would matter. The Mercedes sedan rolled smoothly onto the shoulder of Highway 52, just outside Richmond, Virginia. Marcus activated his hazard lights, placed both hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, where they would be clearly visible, and waited. His heart hammered against his ribs in a rhythm he recognized. Not panic, but preparedness. The kind of alertness that keeps you alive when things can go wrong in an instant. 20 minutes ago, he'd been the happiest man alive. His daughter Amara had just graduated from Georgetown University School of Law. Top of her class, full-ride scholarship offered to one of the most prestigious civil rights firms in Washington, D.C. She'd given a speech that morning that brought tears to his eyes, talked about justice, about integrity, about the example her father had set throughout her childhood. He'd been so proud he could barely breathe. The graduation program still sat on the passenger seat, the embossed Georgetown seal catching the last rays of evening sunlight. Marcus had been planning to frame it, maybe hang it in his chambers right next to his law degree and his judicial appointment certificate. A reminder that everything he'd sacrificed, every late night, every missed dinner, every moment of doubt, it had all been worth it. Now, watching the police cruiser park behind him in his side mirror, Marcus felt that joy evaporating like morning dew under a brutal sun. The officer who emerged from the vehicle moved with a particular kind of aggressive confidence Marcus had seen too many times before. Broad shoulders, thick neck, mirrored sunglasses despite the fading daylight. His hand rested casually on the butt of his service weapon as he approached an intimidation tactic so common it was almost cliché. Officer Derek Hastings was 38 years old, though the permanent scowl etched into his face made him look older. He'd been with the Richmond County Police Department for 12 years, long enough to know every trick, every loophole, every way to make a traffic stop feel like an interrogation. His patrol car's dashboard camera had been strategically angled to create a blind spot, a little trick he'd learned from a veteran officer years ago. Not broken enough to trigger an IT review, but positioned just right, so that whatever happened during his stops occurred conveniently off-camera. Tonight, Hastings was hunting. His Sergeant Willis had made it crystal clear. 3DU, I arrests this month or face demotion to foot patrol. Hastings already had 2. He needed one more, and he wasn't picky about how he got it. When he'd spotted the black Mercedes with DC plates 15 minutes ago, something in his gut told him this was it. Expensive car, out-of-state tags, black driver, the trifecta. He'd run the plates. Registration clean, no warrants, no violations. But that didn't matter. He'd find something. He always did. Hastings rapped his knuckles hard against Marcus's window, the sound sharp and demanding. Marcus lowered the window slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Good evening, officer. License and registration." Hastings' voice was flat, devoid of the courtesy most officers extended during routine stops. "Now, may I ask why I was stopped?" Marcus kept his tone even professional. Not confrontational, but not subservient either. "I'll ask the questions." Hastings leaned down, shining his flashlight directly into Marcus's face, despite the fact that it wasn't dark yet. "License and registration. Don't make me ask again." Marcus took a slow breath. 25 years as a prosecutor and public defender before his appointment to the federal bench. He knew the law better than most police officers ever would. He also knew that legal knowledge meant nothing if the person with the badge and gun decided they didn't care. "They're in my glove compartment," Marcus said carefully. "I'm reaching for them now." His hand trembled slightly as he opened the glove compartment. Not from guilt. He had nothing to hide, but from the primal fear that comes when you're a black man being pulled over by a cop who's already decided you're guilty of something. Anything. Marcus retrieved his license and registration, handing them through the window. Hastings snatched them without a word, studying the documents with exaggerated scrutiny. Marcus watched the officer's eyes flick from the license photo to Marcus's face, then back again, searching for discrepancies that didn't exist. "Step out of the vehicle," Hastings said suddenly. "For what reason?" "You were swerving back there, crossing the center line. I have reason to believe you're driving under the influence." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Officer, I wasn't swerving. I've been driving in a straight line since I entered this highway. Are you calling me a liar?" Hastings' hand moved to his weapon again, a not-so-subtle threat. "I'm stating a fact. I haven't been drinking. I wasn't swerving. Is your dashboard camera recording this stop?" Hastings' face flushed. "Camera malfunctioned. Been broken for 2 weeks. Now get out of the vehicle before I add obstruction to your charges. Charges, plural." Before any investigation had even begun, Hastings was already talking about charges. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt, slowly opened his door, and stepped onto the gravel shoulder. He kept his hands visible at all times, moving with deliberate care. Every action telegraphed nothing sudden, nothing that could be misinterpreted or intentionally misinterpreted as threatening. The evening air was warm, carrying the scent of honeysuckle from the nearby fields. Under different circumstances, it might have been pleasant. Right now, standing on the side of a highway with a hostile officer radiating aggression, Marcus felt only dread. "I'm going to need you to perform some field sobriety tests," Hastings announced, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "I haven't been drinking," Marcus repeated. "I'm happy to take a breathalyzer test. You'll do what I tell you to do." Behind them, a sedan slowed as it passed the driver, craning their neck to watch. Then another car, a silver BMW with a middle-aged white couple inside. The woman pointed at Marcus, her voice carrying through her open window. "See, honey, I told you this was becoming a bad neighborhood." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had hardened in his chest. Not anger. He couldn't afford anger, but determination. Whatever happened tonight, he would remember every detail, every word, every violation. "Walk this line," Hastings commanded, gesturing to the white line marking the highway shoulder. "Heel to toe." Marcus complied, walking the line in his dress shoes on the uneven gravel. He'd worn his best suit that morning for Amara's graduation, Italian leather shoes that were meant for courthouse floors, not highway shoulders. But he walked the line perfectly heel to toe, exactly as instructed. "Again," Hastings said. "You were wobbling." "I wasn't wobbling. I'll be the judge of that." If only you knew, Marcus thought, but kept the words locked behind his teeth. "Touch your nose with your eyes closed," Hastings ordered next. Marcus did. Perfectly. Recite the alphabet backwards. "That's not a standard field sobriety test," Marcus said quietly. "It is when I say it is. Now do it, or we're going straight to arrest." Marcus recited the alphabet backwards, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. ZYXW. All the way to A. Hastings grunted, clearly disappointed. He'd been hoping Marcus would fail, would give him something concrete to justify the stop. But Marcus had passed every test, performed every task flawlessly. So, Hastings changed tactics. "I'm going to search your vehicle," he announced. "Under what probable cause your attitude is my probable cause. Pop the trunk. I don't consent to a search without probable cause." "Under the Fourth Amendment, you think you're smart." Hastings stepped closer, invading Marcus' personal space. His breath smelled of coffee and something sour. "You think throwing around legal terms impresses me. I've dealt with 1,000 guys like you. Public defender, right? Think you know the law." "Close," Marcus said quietly. "Close." Hastings laughed a harsh bark of sound. "Let me guess. Paralegal court clerk." "No, wait. You probably work in the mailroom at some law firm pushing papers thinking that makes you special." Marcus said nothing. He'd learned a long time ago that silence was sometimes the best defense. "I'm searching your vehicle," Hastings repeated. "You can consent, or I can make this a lot more difficult for you." Without waiting for an answer, Hastings strode to the Mercedes and began rifling through it. He tossed papers from the front seat onto the pavement. The graduation program fluttered in the breeze, and Marcus watched it skid across the gravel, the embossed seal now scuffed with dirt. Hastings searched for 15 minutes. The glove compartment, under the seats, the trunk. Every compartment opened, every space invaded. He found nothing. No drugs, no alcohol, no weapons. Nothing illegal because there was nothing to find. The officer's frustration was palpable now, his movements growing more aggressive, more desperate. He needed something, anything, to justify this stop. Among the vehicles that had slowed to watch was a silver Honda Civic. Behind the wheel sat Michael Chen, a 34-year-old civil rights attorney heading home after a long day at his office. Chen had spent the past 6 years working on police misconduct cases. He knew an illegal stop when he saw one, and this was textbook illegal. Chen pulled his car onto the shoulder about 100 yards ahead of the Mercedes, killed his engine, and pulled out his phone. He began recording, capturing everything. The officer searching the vehicle without consent. Marcus standing with his hands visible at all times. The complete absence of any legitimate probable cause. 42 minutes had passed since the initial stop. Marcus had been standing on the side of Highway 52 for 42 minutes, subjected to tests and searches, his dignity stripped away piece by piece, while cars full of strangers drove past and stared. Then Hastings found his excuse. "I smell marijuana," he announced, walking back toward Marcus. "There is no marijuana in my vehicle. Are you calling me a liar?" Hastings' face was red now. Rage barely contained beneath his professional facade. "I'm stating a fact. I don't use drugs." "There are no drugs in my car. Turn around. Hands behind your back." Marcus's heart sank. "On what charge?" "Suspicion of driving under the influence, obstruction of justice, and resisting arrest." "I haven't resisted anything. I've cooperated with every turn around." In that moment, standing on the side of that highway with a police officer screaming at him, Marcus thought of Amara, his brilliant, compassionate daughter who'd stood before a crowd that morning and talked about believing in the legal system, about trusting that justice existed, about following her father's example. What would she think when he called her from jail? When she learned that her father, a federal judge, had been arrested like a common criminal on the happiest day of their lives? Would she lose faith in everything he'd taught her? Marcus turned around slowly. He felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around his wrists, tighter than necessary, the edges biting into his skin. He heard someone in a passing car shout, "This is wrong." He didn't do anything. Hastings whirled toward the voice. "Keep moving or you're next." But the cars kept slowing. The phones kept recording. Marcus looked directly at one of those phones, making eye contact with whoever was filming. "Record everything," he said clearly. "This stop was unlawful. I have broken no laws." "Get in the cruiser," Hastings growled, shoving Marcus toward the patrol car. "You can save your speeches for the judge." Marcus almost smiled at that. Almost. That's exactly what I intend to do, he said quietly. Hastings didn't catch the implication. He was too busy congratulating himself on finally making the arrest, on securing that third DUI that would keep him off foot patrol. As the cruiser pulled away, Marcus's Mercedes sat abandoned on the shoulder papers scattered across the ground. Among them, that graduation program. Amara's name printed in elegant script now crumpled and stained. And on the pavement lying face down where it had fallen from Marcus's wallet during the search was a business card. Michael Chen approached the abandoned vehicle carefully. He'd watched the entire encounter, recorded every second. As a civil rights attorney, he'd seen dozens of these stops, but something about this one felt different. The driver's composure, his educated manner of speaking, the way he'd cited the Fourth Amendment without hesitation. Chen peered through the Mercedes window at the scattered papers. That's when he saw it. The Georgetown Law graduation program. He took a photo documenting the scene. Then he noticed the business card on the ground. He picked it up, turned it over, and felt his blood run cold. Judge Marcus Thornton, United States District Court, Eastern District of Virginia. Chen pulled out his phone with shaking hands, pulling up Google. He typed the name. Marcus Thornton's official judicial photograph appeared on the screen. The same face he'd just watched being handcuffed and arrested. "Oh my God," Chen whispered. "Hastings arrested a federal judge." He looked down at the business card again, then at his phone recording. He had everything documented, every moment, every violation, and he knew exactly what to do with it. But first, Officer Hastings had no idea what kind of mistake he'd just made. The Richmond County Sheriff's Department was a squat brick building that had seen better days. Built in the 1970s, it smelled of stale coffee, old paperwork, and the particular brand of institutional disinfectant used in government buildings everywhere. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow. Marcus was led through the back entrance in handcuffs, his expensive suit jacket wrinkled from sitting in the back of the patrol car, his wrists aching from the too tight cuffs. He walked with his head high, spine straight, refusing to adopt the defeated posture Hastings clearly expected. The booking area was small, dominated by a raised desk where Sergeant Linda Morales sat reviewing paperwork. Morales was a 15-year veteran of the department, a professional who prided herself on running a tight ship. She looked up as Hastings brought Marcus in her dark eyes, taking in the scene with practiced assessment. "What do we have?" Morales asked, her voice neutral. "DU, I suspect," Hastings announced. Pulled him over for swerving, failed multiple field sobriety tests, refused to consent to a search. Every word was a lie, and Marcus felt rage building in his chest. But he kept his expression calm, his breathing steady. Name Morales asked, fingers poised over her keyboard. Marcus Thornton. Something flickered in Morales's eyes. Recognition, uncertainty. Marcus couldn't tell. Occupation. "I work for the federal government. He's unemployed," Hastings interjected quickly. "Just look at him." Morales glanced at Hastings, then back at Marcus. Her fingers hadn't moved to type yet. "Sir, which department of the federal government?" "Federal Judiciary," Marcus said, clearly maintaining direct eye contact with her. Now, there was definitely something in her expression. She sat up straighter, her professional mask cracking slightly. Which specific area?" she asked carefully. "Eastern District of Virginia." Morales's fingers froze over the keyboard. She stared at Marcus for a long moment, and he could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Federal Judiciary, Eastern District. There weren't many people who worked in that specific area, and even fewer who would state it so calmly while being booked for DUI. "Your full name, again?" "Marcus Thornton." She typed it slowly into the computer system. The screen loaded, and Marcus watched her face go pale. She looked at her monitor, then at Marcus, then back at her monitor. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Derek," she said quietly, "do you know who this is?" "Some guy who thinks he's important," Hastings said dismissively. He was filling out paperwork at a side desk, not even looking up. "Probably one of those sovereign citizen types. They always claim to work for the government." "Derek." Morales's voice was sharp now. "Look at me." Hastings glanced up, irritated. "What?" "This is Judge Marcus Thornton." The pen in Hastings's hand stopped moving. "What Judge Marcus Thornton?" Morales spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "United States District Court. Federal. Eastern District of Virginia." The color drained from Hastings's face. He stood up slowly, walked over to Morales's desk, and stared at her computer screen. Marcus could see the exact moment comprehension hit. The way Hastings' eyes widened, the way his mouth opened slightly, the way his hand gripped the edge of the desk. "He's a judge," Hastings' voice came out as a whisper. "He's a federal judge," Morales corrected. "And according to this database, he presides over criminal cases and civil rights violations." She looked up at Marcus, and there was something like apology in her eyes. "Your Honor, Sergeant," Marcus interrupted gently. "Right now, I'm not, Your Honor. Right now, I'm a citizen who was illegally detained. We can sort out the rest later." Hastings was still standing, frozen, staring at the computer screen as if willing it to change. I didn't know." "No," Marcus agreed. "You didn't. Because you never asked. You saw a black man in an expensive car and made assumptions. We need to do a breathalyzer," Morales said, already reaching for the equipment. Her movements were brisk, professional, but Marcus could see the concern in her eyes. She knew Hastings had screwed up. Badly. The breathalyzer test took less than 2 minutes. Marcus breathed into the device, watching Hastings's face the entire time. The result flashed on the screen. 0.00 BAC. 0.00. Completely sober. Not a single drop of alcohol in his system. "Derek," Morales said quietly. "He blew zeros. I can see that." "Then why process him anyway?" Hastings snapped. "I smelled marijuana. That's probable cause." "Derek, if he blew zeros, I said process him." Hastings's voice rose, drawing attention from other officers in the station. "I know what I saw out there. He was impaired. File the damn charges." Morales looked at Marcus, and in her eyes he saw something rare in a police station. Doubt in the arresting officer's account. She'd been doing this job for 15 years. She knew when officers were covering their asses protecting bad stops. "I need to make a phone call," Marcus said calmly. "That's my right." Morales nodded, gesturing to a phone on the wall. "Of course, Your Honor." She caught herself. "Sir." Marcus walked to the phone, very aware of Hastings watching his every move. He dialed a number he knew by heart, even though he hadn't called it in months. 2 rings. Then a voice. "Cole. Ray. It's Marcus. I need you to pick me up." Marcus. Raymond. Cole's voice shifted immediately from sleepy to alert. "Pick you up. Where are you, Richmond County Sheriff's Department?" "What? Why long story?" "Can you just come? I'm on my way. 20 minutes. In the background, Hastings must have heard Cole address Marcus by name because he said loudly, "Yeah, and I'm the president. Everyone in here has a friend coming to get them." Marcus hung up and turned around. "Officer Hastings, I have complied with every instruction you've given tonight. I submitted to field sobriety tests. I took a breathalyzer. I answered your questions, and I've broken 0 laws. That's not how I saw it." "Then perhaps your perception is the problem." Hastings moved toward Marcus, and for a moment Morales tensed, ready to intervene. But Hastings just stood there, glaring, clearly trying to reassert some sense of authority he felt slipping away. "You can lawyer up all you want," Hastings said. "Judges don't scare me. I've arrested plenty of people who thought they were above the law." "I never said I was above the law," Marcus replied quietly. "I said I've broken none of them. There's a difference." 23 minutes later, the front doors of the sheriff's department opened. Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Raymond Cole strode in wearing his full uniform. Dark pants, white shirt badge prominently displayed on his belt. At 6'3", with shoulders that filled doorways and 25 years of experience written in the lines of his face, Cole commanded attention the moment he entered a room. "I'm here for Marcus Thornton," he announced. Morales looked up. "And you are?" Cole pulled out his credentials, flipping them open. "Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal District of Columbia. Judge Thornton is a federal official. I'm here to escort him home. He was arrested for DUI," Hastings started. "Did he blow?" Cole interrupted, his voice sharp. "0. Morales answered before Hastings could speak. "Then release him. Now." "There were other charges." "What other charges?" Cole's eyes fixed on Hastings like a hawk spotting prey. "Obstruction. Based on what resisting? I'd love to see the body camera footage of that." "Camera malfunctioned," Hastings muttered. "How convenient." Cole turned to Morales. "Sergeant, I'm sure you're aware that false arrest of a federal official is itself a federal crime. I'm also sure you don't want this department under FBI investigation. So I'll ask one more time. Release Judge Thornton." Morales didn't hesitate. She pulled up the booking information and began typing rapidly. "I'm voiding the charges. There was insufficient probable cause." Insufficient, Hastings started. "Derek." Morales' voice was steel. "Stop talking." She printed out a release form, handed it to Marcus. "Your Honor, I apologize for any inconvenience." Marcus signed the form, collected his wallet and phone from the property envelope. As he turned to leave with Cole, he paused. "Officer Hastings." Hastings looked up, his face a mask of barely contained rage and fear. "See you Monday." "What?" "Monday. 9 a.m. Courtroom 4. Hastings' expression shifted from confusion to horror. "What are you talking about?" "You have a case before me. Jerome Williams versus Officer Derek Hastings. Excessive force. Civil rights violation. I've been assigned to preside over that case for 3 weeks now." The blood drained from Hastings' face. He grabbed the edge of Morales' desk, knuckles white. I didn't." "No, you didn't." Marcus's voice was calm, almost gentle. "But that's the problem, isn't it? You never do. You see someone make assumptions and act on them without ever considering that you might be wrong." Marcus walked toward the door, then paused one more time. "Every word you said tonight, it will be in my testimony. Every illegal action documented. Every violation of my constitutional rights on the record." He held Hastings' gaze. "You told me to save it for the judge. Here I am." The door closed behind him, leaving Hastings standing in the booking area, his career crumbling around him in real time. Morales looked at him, and her expression was unreadable. "Derek, what did you do?" Hastings couldn't answer. He just stood there staring at the door Judge Marcus Thornton had walked through, realizing that he'd just made the worst mistake of his entire career. And Monday morning, less than 36 hours away, he was going to face the consequences in open court. Raymond Cole's SUV pulled out of the sheriff's department parking lot in silence. The big marshal kept his eyes on the road, but Marcus could feel the tension radiating from his old friend. They'd known each other for nearly 2 decades, had worked together when Marcus was a federal prosecutor, and Cole was a younger marshal assigned to witness protection details. They'd stayed in touch over the years, sharing occasional lunches, comparing notes on the criminal justice system they both served. But Cole had never seen Marcus like this. Wrinkled suit, exhausted eyes, the faint red marks on his wrists where the handcuffs had been too tight. They drove for 5 minutes before Cole finally spoke. "Marcus, are you okay?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He stared out the window at the passing streetlights, watching Richmond slide by in the darkness. Normal people were finishing their Sunday evenings, watching television, putting kids to bed, living their ordinary peaceful lives. He'd been one of them just 3 hours ago. "I've sent men to prison," Marcus said quietly. "I've ruled on cases involving murder, rape, armed robbery. I've held more power in a courtroom than most people will ever have in their entire lives." He turned to look at Cole. "And tonight, Ray, I was completely powerless. That officer could have done anything to me. Anything. And I had no recourse in that moment. None." Cole's jaw tightened. "But you do now." "Yes, I do now. But how many people have gone through exactly what I just experienced and had no one to call, no federal marshal friend, no judicial appointment, no position of authority to fall back on?" His voice cracked slightly, and he hated himself for it. "How many, Ray? How many people has Hastings done this to who had no way to fight back?" "Too many," Cole said grimly. "But Monday morning, you make sure it's one less." The SUV pulled into Marcus's driveway 20 minutes later. It was a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, well-maintained but not ostentatious. Marcus had bought it after his wife died, needing a fresh start, a place without her ghost in every room. He sat in the driveway for almost 10 minutes after Cole left, unable to make himself go inside. The porch light was on, warm and welcoming, but Marcus felt anything but welcome in his own skin right now. Finally, he forced himself out of the vehicle and into the house. The first thing he did was call Amara. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, is everything okay?" "It's late." Just hearing her voice made his chest tighten. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. What's wrong? You sound..." "I was pulled over tonight, on my way home from your graduation." Silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. Pulled over. Why Marcus told her everything. The stop, the illegal search, the false arrest, the handcuffs. He kept his voice steady, matter-of-fact, as if he were recounting someone else's story. But Amara knew him too well. "Dad!" Her voice broke. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey. I'm home. I'm safe. I can't believe they did that to you. You're a judge. You didn't do anything wrong. Amara, listen to me." Marcus sat down heavily on his couch, suddenly exhausted. "Don't say you're a judge. That's exactly the problem. I shouldn't need to be a judge to be treated with respect and basic human dignity. Neither should anyone else." She was crying now. He could hear it in her breathing. "What happens Monday?" she asked. "Monday, I have a hearing, and Officer Hastings is going to learn what accountability looks like." "Good." Her voice hardened. "Make him pay Dad. I'm not interested in revenge, sweetheart. I'm interested in making sure the law works. That's better than revenge. That's justice." They talked for another 30 minutes. Amara wanted to drive down from D.C., stay with him, make sure he was all right. Marcus convinced her to stay put, that he was fine, that he had work to do, and she had her new job starting in 3 days. After he hung up, Marcus sat in the darkness of his living room for a long time. He didn't turn on any lights. He just sat there, processing everything that had happened. He thought about all the cases he'd presided over, all the defendants who'd claimed they were innocent, that the police had lied, that the stop was illegal. He'd believed some of them, ruled in their favor when the evidence supported their claims. But how many others had he dismissed? How many people had stood before his bench, telling the absolute truth about police misconduct, and he'd given the officers the benefit of the doubt, tonight had stripped away any remaining illusions he might have had about the system he served. It could be better. It had to be better. And Monday morning, he was going to start making it better. Meanwhile, across town, Michael Chen sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, uploading the video he'd recorded to a secure server. He'd already called the ACLU of Virginia, spoken to their legal director, explained what he'd witnessed. Now he was doing something else. Research. He pulled up every public record he could find on Officer Derek Hastings. Arrest records, court cases, use of force reports. It took hours cross-referencing databases following paper trails, but Chen had been doing this kind of investigative work for 6 years. He knew how to find what others tried to hide, and what he found made him physically ill. Over the past 18 months, Hastings had conducted 247 traffic stops. Chen pulled the demographic data from each one, information that was technically public record, but rarely analyzed because no one bothered to look. 206 of those stops, 83%, involved minority drivers. Hastings patrolled the entire county. His beat included wealthy white suburbs, middle-class integrated neighborhoods, and predominantly Black and Latino areas. The demographics of the county were roughly 60% white, 30% Black, 10% Latino, and other minorities. Yet 83% of his stops were minorities. Chen created a spreadsheet. Arrest rates, use of force incidents, complaints filed, complaints dismissed. The pattern was undeniable, overwhelming, damning. He picked up his phone and called his sister Sarah, who worked at the same civil rights firm. "Sarah, it's Michael. I need you to see something. It's almost midnight." She groaned. "I know, but this is important. I just watched a federal judge get illegally arrested." That woke her up. What Judge Marcus Thornton, Eastern District, the officer who arrested him. He has a case before Thornton on Monday morning, excessive force and civil rights violations. Silence on the other end as Sarah processed this information. "Michael, please tell me you recorded it. Every second, and I have his stop data. Sarah, this officer has a pattern going back years, dozens of victims, maybe hundreds. Send me everything. I'll review it tonight." Chen hit send on the email before they even hung up. Video footage, stop data, cross-referenced demographic information. Everything. By 1 a.m, Sarah Chen called him back. "Michael, this is bigger than one bad cop. This is a civil rights lawsuit waiting to happen. Multiple plaintiffs, maybe even a DOJ investigation. What do we do Monday morning? I'm going to be in courtroom 4, and I'm going to make sure Judge Thornton knows exactly who he's dealing with. You think he doesn't already know? I think he knows about his own case. But he might not know about the other 11 victims who filed complaints, or the 47 complaints that were dismissed by internal affairs, or the fact that every single one of those complaints was reviewed by the same lieutenant who consistently marked them unsubstantiated." Chen leaned back in his chair. "We're not just taking down one cop." "No," Sarah agreed. "We're exposing a protection racket inside the police department. And come Monday morning, it's all going to unravel." Sunday night bled into Monday morning. Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in his home office, reviewing case files, preparing for the hearing that was now far more complicated than a simple civil rights lawsuit. He had to be careful. So careful. As a federal judge, he had to maintain not just actual impartiality, but the appearance of impartiality. He couldn't let his personal experience compromise his judicial integrity. But he also couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. At 7 a.m., he showered, shaved, put on a fresh suit. In the mirror, he looked like the same man who'd left for Georgetown on Friday morning. But something in his eyes had changed. A hardness that hadn't been there before. At 8:30, Marcus arrived at the federal courthouse. His chambers were on the 4th floor overlooking downtown Richmond. His law clerk, Jennifer, looked up from her desk with concern when he entered. "Judge Thornton, are you all right? You look—" "I'm fine, Jennifer. Has the Williams case been moved or postponed?" "No, sir. Still scheduled for 9 a.m. But Judge Thornton, there's been some unusual activity this morning." "What kind of activity?" "3 local news crews outside. And the gallery is already packed. I've never seen this many people show up for a civil suit hearing." Marcus nodded slowly. Of course. The videos from last night had circulated on social media. People knew something significant was about to happen. "Jennifer, I need you to pull something for me. Officer Hastings' complete service record. Every complaint filed against him. Every internal affairs review. Every use of force incident. I want everything on my desk in the next 20 minutes." "Yes, sir." "Is this about yes?" She hurried off, and Marcus entered his private chambers. He put on his black judicial robe, fastened it carefully, then stood at the window looking down at the city he'd sworn to serve. Today was going to change everything. At 8:55, Marcus walked through the hallways of the courthouse toward Courtroom 4. Staff members who passed him nodded respectfully, but he caught the looks they gave each other after he'd gone by. They knew. Everyone knew. He entered the courtroom from the judge's entrance behind the bench. The room fell silent the moment he appeared. The gallery was indeed packed, not just with the usual court watchers and journalists, but with people Marcus recognized. Civil rights advocates, ACLU representatives, community leaders. And in the back row he spotted Michael Chen sitting next to a woman who looked enough like him to be a sibling. At the plaintiff's table sat Jerome Williams, a 41-year-old black man wearing a suit that looked borrowed, his hands clasped nervously on the table. Next to him sat Sarah Chen, looking professional and prepared. At the defendant's table sat Officer Derek Hastings, and Hastings looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Marcus took his seat at the bench, adjusted his microphone, and surveyed the courtroom. The air was electric with anticipation. Every seat filled. Cameras in the back, though they weren't allowed to broadcast live, they could record for later news coverage. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia is now in session, the Honorable Judge Marcus Thornton presiding." The room stood as one. "Be seated." Marcus said, his voice carrying across the courtroom with the authority of decades of practice. Everyone sat. Marcus took a moment, letting the silence settle. Then he spoke. "Before we begin today's proceedings in the matter of Williams versus Hastings, I must address a significant conflict of interest." Every eye in the room fixed on him. "Officer Hastings, please stand." Hastings rose slowly, his lawyer half standing as if to object, but unsure what to say. "Last night at approximately 7:45 p.m., you pulled me over on Highway 52 as I was returning home from my daughter's college graduation. Do you remember that stop?" Hastings' face had gone pale. "Your Honor, Yes or no, Officer Hastings? Do you remember pulling me over last night?" "Yes, sir." "You claimed I was swerving across the center line. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. I wasn't swerving. I was driving in a straight line at exactly the speed limit. Your dashboard camera, you claimed, was non-functional. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. You demanded to search my vehicle without probable cause. You subjected me to field sobriety tests, despite no evidence of impairment. You arrested me for driving under the influence, obstruction of justice, and resisting arrest. Do you dispute any of these facts?" Hastings looked at his lawyer, who remained frozen. No one had prepared for this. No one could have anticipated this scenario. Your Honor, if I had known, if you had known I was a judge, would your actions have been different?" Silence. "Answer the question." Officer Hastings. "Yes, sir. They would have been different." Why, Hastings stammered. Because you're a federal judge. So you acknowledge that you would have treated me differently based solely on my position of authority, not on whether I had actually violated any laws. Yes, sir. Marcus let that hang in the air for a moment. Let the record show that Officer Hastings has admitted he would have treated me differently had he known my occupation. This admission goes directly to the heart of the case before us today. Because Jerome Williams, Marcus gestured to the plaintiff, deserved the same respect, the same constitutional protections, the same presumption of innocence that you would have extended to me had you known who I was. The courtroom was completely silent. For the record, Marcus continued, the breathalyzer test you administered last night showed 0.00 blood alcohol content. I had not been drinking. I had not been using drugs. I had committed no traffic violations. Yet you arrested me anyway. You filed charges that Sergeant Morales voided within 2 hours because they were baseless. Hastings' lawyer finally found his voice. Your Honor, we move for immediate recusal on the grounds of bias, motion denied, Marcus said sharply. I am disclosing this conflict precisely to ensure transparency. I will hear testimony regarding Officer Hastings' pattern of conduct, and then I will recuse myself from rendering a final judgment. But first, this court will examine the evidence. He turned to Sarah Chen. Ms. Chen, you represent the plaintiff. Are you prepared to proceed? Sarah stood, and Marcus saw the determined gleam in her eye. She knew exactly what she was doing. Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff is prepared to present evidence of a long-standing pattern of civil rights violations, excessive force, and targeted harassment by Officer Hastings against minority residents of Richmond County. Proceed. Sarah approached the bench with a tablet. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to enter into evidence a statistical analysis of Officer Hastings' traffic stops over the past 18 months. Granted. A screen lowered from the ceiling and a graph appeared. Blue bars represented white drivers stopped. Red bars represented minority drivers stopped. The visual was stark, overwhelmingly red. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Your Honor, over the course of 18 months, Officer Hastings conducted 247 traffic stops. Of those stops, 206, 83%, involved minority drivers. Marcus studied the graph carefully. Officer Hastings' Richmond County's demographics are approximately 60% white, 30% black, and 10% other minorities. Is that correct? I don't know the exact numbers. Those are the census numbers. Officer, can you explain why your stops don't reflect those demographics? I patrol areas where there's more crime. Your patrol route includes the entire county, according to department records. Your beat rotation covers wealthy suburbs, middle-class neighborhoods, and every area in between. Try again. Hastings had no answer. Sarah continued. Additionally, Your Honor, of those 206 stops of minority drivers, 84 resulted in arrests, an arrest rate of 40%. Of his 41 stops of white drivers, only 3 resulted in arrests, 7%. More gasps from the gallery, and his use of force incidents. Sarah pulled up another slide. In 18 months, Officer Hastings has 12 documented use of force incidents. The department average is 2 per officer over the same period. All 12 of his incidents involved minority suspects. Marcus felt a cold anger settling in his chest. This wasn't just one bad stop. This wasn't even just a pattern. This was a deliberate, targeted campaign of harassment and abuse. Ms. Chen, you mentioned prior complaints against Officer Hastings. Yes, Your Honor. 11 formal complaints filed over the past 8 years. All 11 were reviewed by Internal Affairs and marked unsubstantiated or unable to prove. All 11 by the same investigator. Sarah smiled grimly. Yes, Your Honor. Lieutenant Frank Morrison reviewed every complaint against Officer Hastings. He also reviewed complaints against 3 other officers who show similar patterns in their stop data. Lieutenant Morrison closed each investigation within 48 hours, typically without interviewing witnesses or reviewing available body camera footage. Where is Lieutenant Morrison now? He resigned this morning, Your Honor. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Marcus gavelled for order. I want to be clear, Marcus said, directing his words to the entire courtroom. This court is not conducting a criminal trial at this moment. We are here for a civil suit brought by Mr. Williams. However, the pattern evidence presented here suggests issues far beyond one plaintiff's complaint. He turned to Jerome Williams. Mr. Williams, would you like to address the court? Jerome stood slowly approaching the witness stand. He was sworn in, and Sarah began her direct examination. Mr. Williams, can you describe the night Officer Hastings arrested you? Jerome's voice was quiet but steady. It was my birthday, January 14th of last year. I was driving home from my mother's house. She'd made my favorite dinner like she does every year. What happened? I was on Miller Road about 2 blocks from my house when Officer Hastings pulled me over. Said my taillight was out. Was your taillight out? No, ma'am. I'd had my car inspected the week before. Everything was working fine. What happened next? He asked where I was coming from. I told him my mother's house. He asked if I'd been drinking. I said no. He said I was lying, that I was probably coming from a drug house. Jerome's voice cracked slightly. He demanded to search my car. I said no. I didn't consent. He said that made me suspicious that only people with something to hide refuse searches. Then what? He pulled me out of the car, slammed me against the hood, put the handcuffs on so tight my wrists bled. Jerome held up his wrists. Even from the bench, Marcus could see the faint scars. He searched my car anyway, even though I didn't consent. Found nothing, no drugs, no weapons, nothing. But he arrested me anyway for resisting arrest even though I never resisted. I just said no to the search. What were the consequences? I spent 3 days in jail before I could make bail. Lost my job at the distribution center because I missed my shift. Had to hire a lawyer I couldn't afford. When I filed a complaint, I got a letter 2 weeks later saying the investigation found insufficient evidence to support my claims. Jerome looked directly at Hastings. I lost my job. My girlfriend left me because she said I was trouble. I had to move back in with my mother at 40 years old, all because I drove 2 blocks on my own birthday. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone in the gallery crying softly. Sarah returned to her table and retrieved a folder. Your Honor, I have affidavits from 3 other individuals who had nearly identical experiences with Officer Hastings. Each filed complaints. Each complaint was dismissed by Lieutenant Morrison. She handed the folder to the bailiff who brought it to Marcus. Marcus reviewed the affidavits carefully. The patterns were unmistakable. Same language, same tactics, same outcome. Officer Hastings, Marcus said. Do you have anything to say in response to this testimony? Hastings' lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, my client. I'm asking Officer Hastings, not his attorney. Hastings stood slowly. He looked at Jerome, then at Marcus, then down at his feet. I was doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, Marcus said quietly. Tell me, Officer Hastings, who were you protecting when you arrested Mr. Williams? Who were you serving when you arrested me? No answer. Did you profile Mr. Williams because he's black? No, sir. Did you profile me because I'm black? No, sir. Then explain the 83%. Silence. Marcus leaned forward. Officer Hastings, I have been on this bench for 8 years. Before that, I was a prosecutor for 12 years. Before that, I was a public defender for 5 years. I have spent my entire adult life in courtrooms. I have heard thousands of cases, listened to thousands of testimonies, and reviewed thousands of pieces of evidence. He held Hastings' gaze. I know when someone is lying to me. And you, Officer Hastings, are lying. Hastings' face crumbled. He looked like he wanted to say something to defend himself, but no words came. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. A woman in a sharp business suit entered. "Margaret Walsh, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Your Honor," Walsh said, approaching the bench. "Walsh, I apologize for the interruption, but I need to inform the court that my office has received a criminal referral regarding Officer Hastings' conduct. On what grounds? Deprivation of rights under color of law in violation of Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. Given the clear evidence of constitutional violations, including multiple witness testimonies and video documentation, we are fast-tracking this investigation. I anticipate presenting the case to a grand jury within 30 days. The courtroom erupted. Marcus gavelled for order. 30 days is faster than standard procedure, Marcus observed. Yes, Your Honor. However, when a federal official is the victim and there's video evidence of multiple constitutional violations, we have the discretion to prioritize. Additionally, the pattern evidence suggests this may extend beyond individual incidents. We're examining whether there's an organized conspiracy within the department to suppress valid complaints. Hastings made a choking sound. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. Then the courtroom doors opened again. A man in an expensive suit strode in. Gerald Bishop, representing the Richmond Police Union. Your Honor, Gerald Bishop for the Police Union. We're here to ensure Officer Hastings receives adequate representation. Mr. Bishop. Are you aware of the circumstances of this case? I am, Your Honor. While the union doesn't condone misconduct, we have a contractual obligation to provide legal support to our members, even when that member violated a federal judge's civil rights. Everyone deserves representation. Your Honor. You're correct. Marcus acknowledged. Officer Hastings, you now have union representation. You now have... Mr. Bishop. Your client has just heard testimony about a pattern of civil rights violations spanning years. What is your position? We move for dismissal based on denied. Your Honor. You haven't heard the motion. Mr. Bishop, I've reviewed the evidence presented. There is video footage of my own arrest. There is a 0.00 breathalyzer reading. There are 11 prior complaints showing identical patterns. There are 206 traffic stops with demographic disparities that cannot be explained by legitimate law enforcement criteria. What exactly would you like me to dismiss? Bishop hesitated. We request a continuance to review denied. This court will not delay justice because the union arrived late to protect an officer who has violated the rights of dozens of citizens. Marcus turned to Hastings. Officer Hastings, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Did you arrest me last night because I'm Black Hastings' lawyer tried to intervene? Your Honor, my client invokes his Fifth Amendment. This is a civil proceeding, not a criminal trial, Marcus said sharply. The Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination don't apply in the same way. Officer Hastings will answer the question. Hastings looked trapped. His face was red, his hands shaking. I pulled you over because you matched the description of "don't lie to me in my courtroom," Marcus said, his voice like ice. There was no APB, no description, no call. You pulled me over because you saw an expensive car with out-of-state plates driven by a black man, and you made assumptions. Hastings crumbled. Yes, sir, he whispered, louder for the record. Yes, sir. The courtroom was utterly silent. Marcus sat back in his chair. He felt exhausted, drained, but also something else. Vindicated. Not for himself, but for every person who'd stood where he was standing, telling the truth and not been believed. This court finds that the evidence presented demonstrates a clear and consistent pattern of racial profiling, excessive force, and civil rights violations by Officer Derek Hastings. Furthermore, the evidence suggests institutional failure at the departmental level to adequately investigate and address these complaints. He turned to Jerome Williams. "Mr. Williams, this court finds in your favor. Officer Hastings violated your Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure and your 14th Amendment rights to equal protection under the law. You are entitled to compensatory damages which this court will determine after hearing additional testimony." Jerome's eyes filled with tears. Additionally, Marcus continued, "I am issuing the following orders. Richmond Police Department will produce all complaints filed against Officer Hastings dating back 10 years. All body camera footage from his stops over the past 24 months will be reviewed by an independent examiner. A special master will be appointed to investigate internal affairs procedures and determine why valid complaints were dismissed." He looked at Hastings. "Officer Hastings, you humiliated me. You violated my rights. You arrested me without cause. But you know what the greater crime is? Not what you did to me. I have resources, connections, the power to fight back. The greater crime is what you did to Mr. Williams and to all the others who had no way to defend themselves." Marcus picked up his gavel. "This court will recess while I finalize my written opinion. I am also referring this entire matter to the United States Department of Justice for comprehensive review." The gavel fell. "All rise." Marcus stood, and as he walked toward his chambers, he heard applause break out in the gallery. He didn't turn around. Judges didn't acknowledge applause. But inside, he felt something shift. Not triumph, but a sense that maybe, just maybe, the law could actually work the way it was supposed to. Behind him, Derek Hastings sat at the defense table, his head in his hands, his career in ruins, his future uncertain. And for once, justice hadn't just been delayed. It had arrived. The weeks following that Monday hearing moved with the swift efficiency that only federal prosecution can achieve when motivated. The case against Derek Hastings became a priority not just for the U.S. Attorney's Office, but for the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. They'd seen the videos, reviewed the data, interviewed the witnesses, and they'd found something even more disturbing than one racist cop. 6 weeks after the hearing, Marcus received a call from Margaret Walsh. "Judge Thornton, I thought you'd want to know. We've indicted Hastings on 3 federal counts. Just 3. We're starting with the strongest cases. Your arrest, Jerome Williams, and a third victim whose experience was particularly egregious. But Judge Thornton, it doesn't stop there." "What do you mean?" "Lieutenant Morrison, the internal affairs investigator who dismissed all those complaints. We found evidence he was receiving payments from the police union to make cases go away. Not just Hastings cases. Dozens of officers. This goes deep." Marcus felt his stomach turn. How deep we're still investigating, but it looks like a protection racket. Bad officers got covered by Morrison. The union paid him to ensure complaints disappeared, and the officers who benefited kicked back a portion of their overtime pay to fund the scheme. Jesus. We're bringing RICO charges, racketeering, conspiracy, civil rights violations. This is going to be the biggest police corruption case the district has seen in decades. 3 months later, Derek Hastings stood in federal court. Not Marcus's courtroom, but Judge Patricia Henderson's after Marcus had recused himself from all related proceedings. Hastings had tried to fight it first, claimed he was just doing his job, that the statistics were misleading, that he'd never intended to discriminate. But the evidence was overwhelming. Video after video, stop after stop, pattern after undeniable pattern. His lawyer, paid for by the police union, initially had withdrawn after the union itself came under investigation. The public defender assigned to his case had reviewed the evidence and delivered hard news. Fight this and risk 20 years, or take a plea deal. Hastings took the plea. Standing before Judge Henderson, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law. The sentencing hearing was brief. Hastings' family sat in the gallery crying, his ex-wife, his teenage daughter who couldn't look at him, his elderly mother who kept asking what had happened to her boy. Judge Henderson was not sympathetic. "Officer Hastings, you were given extraordinary power. The power to detain, to arrest, to use force in service of the law. You abused that power repeatedly, targeting citizens based on the color of their skin. You violated the very Constitution you swore to uphold." She sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. No parole in the federal system. 8 years meant 8 years. The courtroom emptied and Hastings was led away in handcuffs. The same handcuffs he'd put on Marcus that Sunday night. But the consequences rippled further. Lieutenant Frank Morrison was arrested 3 days after Hastings' sentencing. His bank records revealed he'd received over $200,000 in payments from the police union's legal defense fund. Money that was supposed to support officers facing legitimate complaints, but had been used to buy silence. Morrison flipped on his co-conspirators within 48 hours of his arrest. 3 more officers were suspended. 2 resigned before they could be fired. The union president stepped down amid the scandal, and 11 victims, including Jerome Williams and Marcus himself, filed a class-action civil suit against Richmond County and its police department. The county settled for $4.7 million, rather than face a trial that would expose the full extent of the corruption. Each victim received compensation. More importantly, they received something else. Acknowledgement. The county admitted wrongdoing, published a formal apology, and committed to comprehensive reform. The Department of Justice didn't stop there. They opened a pattern and practice investigation into the entire Richmond Police Department. Within 6 months, they'd issued a scathing report documenting pervasive racial bias in stops, arrests, and use of force. The city entered into a consent decree, 3 years of federal oversight, mandatory changes, independent monitors, community review boards. The kind of top-to-bottom reform that only happens when the federal government forces it. 18 months after that Sunday night traffic stop, Marcus sat in his chambers reviewing case files. His docket remained busy. Criminal cases, civil suits, the normal flow of federal litigation. But now, when defense attorneys claimed their clients had been profiled by police, Marcus listened with different ears. When victims testified about constitutional violations, Marcus heard them with a different heart. He'd framed his arrest report and hung it on his office wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the law was only as good as the people who enforced it, that justice required constant vigilance, that power unchecked became tyranny. Jennifer, his law clerk, had asked him about it once. "Judge, why do you keep that up there? Doesn't it remind you of—" "Yes," Marcus had said simply. "That's exactly why it stays." On a Sunday evening, 18 months after his arrest, Marcus was driving home from visiting Amara. She'd finished her first year at the civil rights firm and was already making a name for herself. She'd taken on 3 police misconduct cases, won 2 settlements, and had a 3rd heading to trial. She was becoming the lawyer he'd always hoped she'd be. Marcus drove the same route he'd taken that night. Highway 52. Same time of evening. Same fading sunlight painting the fields golden, and then blue lights in his rearview mirror. His heart rate spiked immediately. Muscle memory. Trauma response. His hands tightened on the wheel, and for a moment he was back there again. Handcuffed. Helpless. Humiliated. He pulled over, the hands shaking slightly. The officer who approached was young, black, female. She walked with professional confidence, her body camera clearly visible on her uniform. She knocked politely on his window. Marcus lowered it, and before she could speak, he said, "Good evening, officer." "Good evening, sir." Her voice was courteous, respectful. I pulled you over because your right tail light is out. Just wanted to let you know so you can get it fixed. Marcus blinked. My tail light? Yes, sir. The right rear. It's completely out. Might want to take care of that before it gets dark. I wasn't aware. Thank you for letting me know. No problem, sir. I'm required to inform you that this stop is being recorded on my body camera for both your protection and mine. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, officer. Thank you. Drive safely, sir. Have a good evening. She returned to her patrol car and pulled away, leaving Marcus sitting on the shoulder. He sat there for a full minute, his hands on the steering wheel, processing what had just happened. A professional stop. A legitimate reason. Courtesy. Respect. Documentation. Progress. Not perfection. There was still so much work to do, so many departments that hadn't changed, so many officers who still believed the badge made them above accountability. But progress. Marcus allowed himself a small smile, put the car in drive, and headed home. Marcus never forgot that Sunday night. The fear, the helplessness, the rage that came from being treated as guilty until proven innocent simply because of the color of his skin. But he also never forgot what came after, the way the truth had emerged, the way justice, slow and imperfect as it was, had finally arrived. The way one man's courage to stand up had given 11 others the strength to do the same. Derek Hastings served his full 8 years. He was released on a Tuesday morning with a felony record that would follow him forever. He would never work in law enforcement again, never carry a badge, never wield that kind of power. Lieutenant Morrison served 4 years after his plea deal. The other officers involved faced varying consequences. Some fired, some prosecuted, some quietly retired with reduced pensions. The Richmond Police Department transformed under federal oversight. Not overnight, not perfectly, but measurably. Stops became more equitable. Complaints were investigated transparently. Community trust began slowly, painfully to rebuild. Jerome Williams got his job back after the settlement. More than that, he got something money couldn't buy. Validation. Belief. The knowledge that when he said this happened to me, someone had finally listened. Amara Thornton became one of the most sought-after civil rights attorneys in Virginia. She kept a photo in her office, her father in his judicial robes standing beside her in her graduation gown, both of them smiling. Taken the morning before everything changed. She used that photo to remind herself why the work mattered, why every case was personal, why justice delayed was justice denied, but justice witnessed was justice multiplied. Marcus continued serving on the federal bench. He presided over cases involving police accountability with a level of scrutiny that made defense attorneys nervous and plaintiffs hopeful. He'd seen both sides now. The power of the bench and the powerlessness of the accused. He ruled fairly, always fairly, but he no longer gave officers the automatic benefit of the doubt. He'd learned that trust had to be earned, not assumed. On the 5th anniversary of that Sunday night, Marcus received an email from Michael Chen, the attorney who'd witnessed his arrest and documented everything. Judge Thornton, I wanted you to know because of your case I've taken on 14 more police misconduct suits. We've won 9, settled 4, and 1 is still pending. Your willingness to stand up publicly gave others the courage to do the same. Thank you for showing us that the system, as broken as it sometimes is, can still work when good people refuse to stay silent. Michael Chen. Marcus read the email twice, then forwarded it to Amara with a simple note. This is why we do the work. The traffic stop that night wasn't about one judge's authority. It wasn't about one cop's bigotry. It was about something larger. The fragile promise that under law, all people are created equal. That justice isn't just for those with power, but for everyone. That promise gets broken every day in America, in traffic stops, in arrests, in courtrooms where the powerful defend the powerful and the vulnerable stay silent because they've learned that speaking up changes nothing. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes speaking up changes everything. Marcus Thornton learned that he could be treated like a criminal despite decades of service to the law. Derek Hastings learned that no badge places anyone above accountability. Jerome learned that his truth mattered, that his voice had power, that justice delayed is not justice denied, if someone brave enough refuses to let it go. And everyone who watched what happened, everyone who saw the videos, read the news stories, followed the case learned that change is possible when people refuse to look away. If you've made it this far in this story, you've witnessed something important. Not because it has a happy ending. Justice is never as simple as happy or sad. But because it's a reminder that your voice matters, that witnessing injustice and staying silent makes you complicit, that recording, documenting, speaking up, refusing to accept that's just how things are. These things change the world. Officer Hastings thought that Sunday night would be like every other stop he'd made. Another citation, another arrest, another closed complaint. He was wrong, because this time someone with power refused to let it go. And that made all the difference. The law is only as good as the people who enforce it fairly. The badge is only as honorable as the person who wears it with integrity. And justice is only real when it applies to everyone, not just those powerful enough to demand it. Marcus Thornton continues to serve on the federal bench today, presiding over cases with the wisdom that comes from seeing both sides of the law. Derek Hastings lives with the consequences of his choices, a reminder that actions have weight, that power comes with responsibility, and that eventually accountability arrives. And somewhere in America tonight, someone is being pulled over unjustly, someone is being profiled, someone is being treated as guilty because of how they look, where they're from, or the assumptions others make about them. Maybe they have the resources to fight back. Maybe they don't. But if enough people refuse to look away, refuse to stay silent, refuse to accept that injustice is inevitable, then maybe the next person won't have to fight alone. That's not just a story. That's a choice we all make. Every single day. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you why justice matters, subscribe to our channel. Because these stories need to be told. These voices need to be heard. And the only way the system changes is when enough people demand it. Your voice matters. Your refusal to accept injustice matters. Don't just watch. Don't just listen. Act.